everyone, and welcome back to Spooky Book Club. I'm so excited for this one today. So today we are reviewing and discussing the spooky book of the month for May, which was called House, and I know I'm gonna eventually mess this up because I keep thinking of House of a Thousand Corpses. And so I keep wanting to say House of a Thousand Whispers, but it's House of 100 Whispers by Graham Masterson. And before we get into this, if you are new here to Spooky Book Club, first of all, welcome. And second of all, I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of all of us here. We can say that we're dying to have you here. So anyways, just really quickly what we kind of do around here, I do a general, super quick review where I just do a quick summary for anyone who hasn't read the book yet and is just here wondering if the book was any good or worth reading or anything like that. I'll kind of go through it really quick. Then we jump into the discussion portion, which is where all the spoilers are, and I kind of just go through and we just do a relaxed little chit chat about the book. I usually just go through the notes in my phone that I made during the process of reading the book. And then I kind of just see where it takes us. And then anything that jumps out at you that I'm discussing, we can talk about in the comments, or if there's anything you want to talk about or mention or whatnot, you can talk about in the comments. We also have a Facebook group, which I will link in the description box, so you can talk about the book there as well. So whatever you guys want to do, I try to keep it pretty open, like we're hanging out together, chit-chatting, sipping on some beverages, maybe having some snacks and talking about books and weird morbid things. I love it. Okay, all right, so that's all I think I had to say about that. So let's move on to the review. So for May, I know I already said what we read 500 times, but I'm gonna say it again. We read House of 100 Whispers by Graham Masterson. I'm gonna do something a little bit different here, and I'm kind of excited about it. I normally do a whole summary and talk about who I think would like this type of book and who I think should pass on this type of book, but I'm not gonna do that this time. I really don't wanna do that for this book because honestly, I would say don't even read the description at all. Just get the book. I will have actually a link to the book in the description box if you want to see it and who it's by and all that kind of stuff. All the information will be in the description. But I would highly recommend not reading anything about this book and just jumping right in. Because I couldn't really remember what the description said. I had no idea. I couldn't even tell you now what it said. The whole book was just this huge surprise. If you are here for spooky books, no matter what, you have to read this book. That's why I'm not really gonna dive into the summary of the book, because this probably was my favorite book we've read in book club in the last, I don't know, how long have we been doing this now? But I feel like this book was just one of those, if you're looking for a spooky book, this one delivers in so many different aspects. So my whole thing here, my general review and general summary is do not listen to anything I'm saying here, just go read it. So yeah, if you haven't read it, go read it. If you did read it and you're ready for the discussion and you're ready for all the spoilers and to talk about all the things, we have so much to talk about. We're gonna get into that. So if you haven't read the book, I'm gonna let you get off here. I'm gonna give you a second. I'm gonna take a little sip of my beverage. And if you're here for the discussion, if you wanna grab a snack or a beverage and we can, you know, get to chit-chatting. I've got my Mr. Skeleton wine glass per usual. Anyways, hope you're enjoying my Holstein goth look today. It's really funny. I was getting ready to film this video and I was like, oh man, I just do not feel like my allergies have been so bad. I just have not felt like getting up at all or doing anything. I really haven't done anything for the last 3 days, but just lay in bed with my eyes closed because my allergies, and I take allergy medication and it helps with the drippage, but it doesn't always help with the sinus pressure. And it's just like behind my eyes. Like I really just want to like stick a fork in my eye and just pop my eyeball out and just scratch behind it or release some pressure or something and then just put it back in. And I know that sounds really morbid and terrible, but it actually sounds really relieving. Anyway, so that's kind of where I've been. So today I was like, I really don't feel like getting ready. I'm just going to do something really low key, I think. Then I go for this like full on like turquoise eye Holstein goth vibe, whatever. Anyways, like any of us are even surprised here. We're not. All right, so now that hopefully everyone has left who has not read this book, because we have to get into this book. What did you think of House of 100 Whispers? Because I was like, okay, I saw some people over in the Facebook group talking about how great it was. Like, they're like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. But, you know, I've enjoyed most of the books in Spooky Book Club. So I'm like, oh yeah, you know, it's good probably, you know, because they've all been, I think, pretty good. But this one was on another level. This was the spooky book that, and I don't know if anyone, if you feel this way, you can let me know in the comments. But if anyone else out there was feeling this, where has this book been all my life kind of situation? Like, I know it's a relatively new book, so we know where it's been. It hasn't been here. But it's just this, I've been waiting for a book like this. That's kind of what I mean by that. I just thoroughly enjoyed everything about this book. I don't know. Anyways, let's jump into it because I'm so excited to talk about this. I don't even know where to start. So let's start with the beginning and kind of what we thought, like where we thought things were going maybe, and then we can jump into the scariest parts and stuff like that, our favorite parts and that kind of thing. So in the very beginning, when the dad, what was his name? Like Herbert or something? I don't know if that was his name. Was that his name? I don't know. I forget already. Herbert, I think was his name. And he gets hit over the head with a hammer and falls down the stairs and all this stuff. And the guy has a pointed, it sounded like he had a mohawk is what it seemed like. Shaved sides of his head and a little point at the top. Then the family comes in. They find out that Timmy, little boy Timmy, is gonna inherit the house. So then Timmy disappears. And that's how the whole story kind of begins. So, all right. My whole thing with that, first of all, with the whole Timmy thing, disappearing, I never really, and you can tell me what you thought in the comments, I never really was convinced fully that he left the house. Like, I thought the whole time it only made sense that he was in the house. Like, just to me, I just felt like he was in the house still. But I thought maybe it was Martin or Martin's wife, Catherine, I think was her name. Because she was kind of acting a little bit weird. Martin was very self-centered and really kind of just like this, like he was really mad about Timmy inheriting the house. And there was that rumor already that Rod or Ron or Rob, I think his name was Rob. I can't believe I already forget his name. Rob wasn't even like the biological child of Herbert. Herbert was not the father, I guess you could say. Anyways, I thought it was Martin, maybe. But then I thought that was maybe too obvious, so it couldn't have been Martin. But then, I don't know, there was something about his wife that was a little strange throughout the whole book. So I thought maybe either it was her or she was getting possessed at one point. Like, I couldn't figure out what was going on with her really at all the whole time. But she was kind of like this wild card character, in my opinion. But anyway, so then they do a tour of the house. And that's when things get a little bit creepy. And I have in my notes one of the first things is that whole stained glass window with the old man Doer or Dewey or whatever. I think it was Doer. Old man Doer and his hounds are all in this stained glass window and it's super creepy. And just in general, I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but stained glass windows in general in homes or just anywhere really are kind of creepy, are just like eerie. I love them. I think they're beautiful, but they have that kind of beautiful, eerie feel to them. And I don't know if it's just because it kind of makes everything kind of dark inside, or the colors can kind of play tricks on you or kind of shine differently on things or people. But it kind of creates a mood or whatever. But just that stained glass window in general was just such a weird choice. And the story didn't even really make sense. I was like, there's something to this story that's just off, which we find out it was off. I was like, this stained glass window can't keep somebody away. There has to be like, especially it's like a picture of the guy. Is that really going to keep them away or keep them there? And that's kind of where I was like, I don't know. But you never know. It's not my story to tell. So anyways, they kind of tour the house, do the whole thing. There's the suitcases in the attic. That's also super weird. I figured right off the bat, I don't feel like that was a hard guess, that the suitcases belonged to the ghost in the house. Kind of made that connection early on, and I feel like the author wanted us to make that connection, although I could be wrong, but I felt like it was a little bit more obvious, so, which it didn't end up ruining anything or whatever. But anyway, so that was kind of the whole beginning part. And I'll jump into kind of the scary parts, what really got me, where I was like, ooh, because, and then just like parts of the story that really stood out and all that kind of stuff. Because this was kind of a long story. It did take us on a ride. So I don't really want to go step by step through the whole thing because I feel like we'd be here for 300 hours. First of all, my favorite spooky parts I'll jump right into it because we're kind of getting to that point anyways as I'm kind of talking about the beginning of the story. But the whispering throughout the whole story, it's just so creepy and I loved it. All the little whispering, like the fact that they have to whisper instead of talk was so spooky. And another thing I had mentioned in my notes about the whispering is how no one else seemed to be that scared. And then people are getting like beat up. Vicky or whatever gets pushed. Rob gets straight up knocked over and punched in the face or whatever, and somebody comes through the wall and whispers in his ear. Like, I would not, I mean, I guess their son was there, but anybody else in the house, like, I'm sorry, like, if that was my niece, I'd be like, dude, I love you, brother. I really want to help find our niece, but I'm going to stay at the hotel down the street and I'll come back every single day to look for her because I cannot do these whispers at night. Well, I guess I'm lying. If it were me, I'd probably do a full-on paranormal investigation. But in this book, if I was not into that and I was just a normal person, I would be terrified of those whispers because there's something just so creepy about a bunch of people whispering. So then this guy comes in and they find this priest hole, right? Or, which ends up being something totally different, but it was originally a priest hole. And I had never heard of a priest hole, which is really weird because I feel like I'm super nerdy about a lot of this kind of stuff, and I still had never heard of a priest hole before. And I looked into it and then I nerded out. Like, I took a solid break from my book to do full research about these priest holes because I was so curious about them. I don't know if anyone else was that excited about them, but I was like, wait, are these real? I need to know about this. And then I went through and then I was telling my husband all about it, the whole history of the priest holes and who built them and how it happened. And my husband was like, oh, like, cause we're both really into this kind of stuff. But I never heard of this mystical priest hole before, and I was so intrigued by it. I love it when spooky books or horror books or whatever you want to call it integrate different elements of history or different occult elements or different cultural elements, just different things like that. I love that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more refreshing. It's not the same old type of story. All right, so the next spooky part that got me, that I loved so much, was when Ada, the charmer, and Francis, like all this stuff had gone on. I think Martin even went missing and all this other stuff is going on in the meantime. That's not spooky, but you know, it's kind of progressing with the story. And they come in and Ada had already been there, I think, to check out the room. And she was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to Francis. And they come back and she's got her obsidian mirror and she sees the shadows and it breaks, and that was spooky and awesome. But then she has this powder. And this is the part I was all excited about. I was all ready to go. I already saw what was going to happen. I knew, and I was excited. I was ready. And she blows the powder on these people. And well, first of all, okay, wait, back up. Was anyone else really pissed off at Francis during all of this? Because Francis was supposed to be this like Gandalf the Grey kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like this older, mature, kind of mysterious wizard man, right? But he's kind of an a-hole. And I don't know if anyone else felt that way. Talking to frickin' Ada. And she's like, you know, I don't feel good about this and I don't know what can be done. Even if, like, she's essentially saying, I don't know if we can save Timmy and we're going to put all these people's lives in danger. I don't feel good about this. I have a really horrible feeling about this. And Francis is over here giving her a guilt trip saying, oh, well, you know, our life's work is to save people and help people. Don't you want to help people? Like, guilt tripping her and making her feeling like she's, like, just some sort of bad person for not wanting to put her entire life on the line or everyone else is in the room. And not know for sure, because at this point we didn't know if Timmy was in there. We didn't know where he was. Anyways, Ada blows the powder because Francis is an a-hole. Ada blows the powder and then you see the outlines of the people, which I got all excited about. Like, yes. But also they grab her and drag her into the wall, and Francis, the a-hole, does nothing. He doesn't help her. He doesn't grab her. He doesn't try to pull her, fight the people. He does nothing. He stands there. All of them did. They all stood there. It blew my mind that no one was scared of these whispers, of these ghosts, of being pushed and tackled, and not one of those people helps poor Ada. They just like let her get sucked into the wall. But then I guess at least they saw it happen, so they knew what was going on. And then I really liked seeing Ada's perspective. From the ghost, I'm going to call it a ghost. I know it's not a ghost, but from a ghost perspective, kind of what was happening to her and what it was like and what was going on, even though there were parts I didn't like about that whole thing that were just terrible. But then Martin, apparently he's a good guy in the afterlife or the in-between life or whatever this is. That whole thing though with Francis, I'm like, and then he comes, like, I feel like Francis was like a secret bad guy. Even though he wasn't a bad guy, I just feel like he was really self-involved because then he comes back with his whole show, you know, the slugs and the freaking shield and the three-headed cat, and I'm like, is all this necessary? Anyways, so that whole part was really creepy though with the powder. I loved it. I ate it up. I loved every minute of it. Oh, and then I guess we can back up a little bit because the match where he lit the match, was it Francis or John? One of them lit the match and it was in the room and they decided then that time stands still. And then when they said time stands still, I immediately thought of that gravestone that said time stands still. But I was kind of just ever so slightly disappointed that not much came out of that. I know at the end he mentioned it. Oh, I saw that on the gravestone or so-and-so was buried at this, you know. But I felt like it could have been something a little bit more, something like it just like was a little bit. And another thing that was like that, there were a lot of dead ends in this story, which I think I liked and I didn't like all at once, because I liked it because it was kind of leading you, you know, through a maze, and you took some wrong turns and you were guessing all the wrong things in this mystery, basically. But then I didn't like it because I felt like there was a lot of potential in some of the areas. So the tombstone was one of them. It kind of just barely materialized, but wasn't much. Also the paintings, the ones that looked like, you know, the hooded people and like those types of the artwork. I thought there was going to be more to that because they were mentioned several times. So I thought there were a couple things in the, or throughout the story that I thought it was going to tie in a little bit more, but I liked it because it did kind of distract me. I had to kind of start over a few times and be like, no, I got to think of a new theory over here. You know what I mean? Or Catherine acting really weird and stuff like that. So, all right. So the next spooky part I really liked, and these were just like the little details I loved about this book. And I think overall, the one thing I loved so much about this book were the little spooky details, the little things that were added in there that just, you know, they were just a little, you know, creepy. Like the breathing, when the ghosts would go, or whatever they were called, would go and suck the breath out of people who were sleeping. Just such a cool kind of creative thing, I think. Kind of reminded me of Casper a little bit. I don't know. So next I have another note about Francis. Before we get into the next spooky thing that I loved, because this happened right before. So, who was it? Rob calls Francis. And he's talking to Francis like, what do? We need to do something. Francis who's like, I can't tell you this. I can't tell you that. I can't tell you anything that might help you at this point at all. I can't tell you anything. So I feel like at some points, Francis just thought this whole thing was a joke, or it was to like benefit his own career or his own curiosities or something. Like there was something that rubbed me the wrong way about him. Let me know in the comments if you felt the same way. But anyways, so Rob calls Francis and Francis is like, whatever you do, don't do anything, basically. And then freaking, of course, he gets off the phone with Francis, and then all of a sudden Rob and Vicky start hearing Timmy crying, and so they go up the stairs, and I'm in my notes, I'm like, don't do it, don't go after him, do not, I just knew. And then that's when probably one of the spookiest things of the whole book happens, where the stained glass window, the doer guy turns around, kind of stretches out, and his face is all elongated and scary, and then the dogs jump out of the stained glass and start chasing after them and ripping their shirts and biting them. And I thought for sure when they went like flying down the stairs or tumbling down the stairs that one of them was going to die. That whole thing, I was just like, why did you have to go after Timmy? The dude, Francis, told you not to do anything. Why did you have to do it? You know he's not there. You've checked the entire house 500 times. Anyway, so then Francis comes with the priest. And now, enter the priest. First of all, I said, I love that the priest's name is Father Salter. Did anyone else love his name? Like Salter? Like I was just thinking of like salt, you know, like throwing salts. So another thing that was really creepy that I loved. This is kind of another one of those things when I was talking about the details that I really loved. I loved that we find out that this isn't a demon, that this is something bigger than that, something older than that, which I love everything about this and where this is going. And it's been called the Fluter. He makes flutes out of the shin bones of his victims. And there was something about that whole thing that I just loved every minute of. I just fully enjoyed that detail, right? I mean, like, it could have just not been there. You could have just not mentioned it. But the fact that this creature makes flutes, of all things, out of shin bones is fantastic and disgusting and amazing and horrifying. It's just my favorite. And I also mentioned, this is just really good storytelling. The random details make this more enjoyable and believable. Anyway, so the priest freaks out, almost has a heart attack, leaves the house, and Francis is like, I'm gonna do this by myself. Naturally. So it was no surprise he was gonna die. I knew he was gonna die. And first of all, or fifth of all, or 10th of all, or whatever this is, I felt like this whole project was so disorganized. Like, I feel like Francis and the priest and John could have worked way better together and gotten all their shit together, combined all of their knowledge. I know they were trying to do that in the beginning, but it was almost like Francis was there and then the priest was there. That they weren't really working together and that John wasn't really working with them. It was like they were all separate people with their own separate interests and their own ways of doing things. I feel like they should have combined or figured, I don't know. Anyways, that's just me being nitpicky, but so here comes Francis, thinking these slugs are gonna save the day, and this three-headed cat and all this stuff, and dude gets straight up skinned, basically alive, and gets drug into the wall, which was terrifying and amazing and gory and all the things I love in spooky books or horror. It was so good. The skin is literally left on the floor. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I feel like every book we've been reading lately, every spooky book, it's like once you get to the ending, it's just like over. It's so easy and done and over with and ta-da, this is it, right? Where this book, it really did make you work for that ending, and it wasn't as easy to get through to this guy as we thought it was gonna be. So I really enjoyed that it took like 3 people to even get to the point where you're actually dealing, like you're fighting the boss kind of thing, you know what I mean? So then we move on to where the priest comes in because we get into another scary part, but Rob calls the priest and has to go pick him up. Another little detail I love, these little details in there, like when the priest's car was being serviced, so Rob had to go pick him up, like just little things like that. I really loved it. Just kind of added to the story, kind of, and once again, made it more believable, kind of broke it up a little bit. Love all those little weird details. Anyway, so he has to go get the priest, brings him back. I thought the priest had a shot at this. I was like, I think he's got this. Like, I think he knows a lot about the history. He's got some training. I think with a little bit of help, maybe like he went to the house, the people in the house. Maybe with a little bit of help, he could actually pull this off. Now, he died even a worse death than Francis, which honestly, Francis deserved the death that Priest got, and Priest could have just gotten sucked in the wall and left his skin behind, and I think that would have been less traumatic than what actually happened to him. And I was thinking, like, maybe we were getting close to done, because the skin on the ground was kind of, you know, it was a little extra something. But no, we have the priest who straight up his head blows off. Like he said, what did he say? Like a watermelon? Like pops off or blows up like a watermelon and his spine rips out. And then his body just completely like exploding or falling off or exploding off or whatever was happening. It kind of reminded me of kind of like a Mortal Kombat fatality situation. If you know, you know, like a Sub-Zero ripped the head and the spine out, or like I can't remember which one it was that would like, I think it would like whisper in your ear and then the whole body would explode. Or just look up Mortal Kombat fatalities, and they have like a whole compilation on YouTube. My brother sent it to me once and we watched it and reminisced about it. Anyways, send each other commentary over it. Okay. Anyways, we're nerds about it. Anyway, so it kind of reminded me of a Mortal Kombat situation, not gonna lie. But I feel like with this book, it's been this kind of spooky house ghost story, but it's added the gore element where it makes sense. So it's not just random gore just to be gory or cheesy gore. It's gore where it counts. And I feel like that's what kind of set this, I mean, the writing in general and the storytelling in general set this book apart from the others we've read. But the gore is where it's at. Anyways, the next spooky part was in the basement after Francis and the priest died, and then he calls John and is like, they died, what do I do? And then John breaks the news that like he found out all this history in the meantime and has all this new information for him. And this is where I'm like, wait a minute. It took 2 people to die to figure this out. Like, come on, people, let's get with it. Anyways, I know that every second counted and they didn't want to get too far removed from the time that these people were sucked into the walls and all that kind of stuff. I know all this, but still, I'm like, they could have gotten together and it still would have led to this one moment. Dude breaks down the wall, goes down to the basement, tears down this tarp thing. I don't know what I was envisioning, but it was a tarp in my mind. And then there's a dude in garb, like normal garb. I was not expecting that. Were you? Were you expecting just a normal guy? I think I was expecting this like monster demon thing or some creature of some sort or some like big, like I know he's like a foot taller than most humans, but I was not expecting just this kind of normal creepy guy with these gray eyes. Which made him creepier, that he was just normal looking, like, or just like dressed normally kind of thing, you know? So yeah, anyways, Rob is just super casual about it. How? I do not know. I would have been freaking out. He showed absolutely no emotion about it. He wasn't scared. He wasn't anything. Just kind of, you know, took him off of his little, like broke away his little chains or whatever and let him go and was like, I'm gonna be upstairs. Like, he was very stern. And I know he said like later on, like he needs me. That's why he's not killing me and that kind of stuff. But anyways, so then they go on their car ride because dude tries to chase him. And then they go through the woods and then he gets flung over the cliff. And I thought Rob was going to die with him. I thought it was going to be a sacrifice. But no, he flung the dude over and he turned into this mass into the water. And it was a whole... I mean, the whole thing honestly was really good. I wasn't expecting any of that to happen. None of it was predictable. Like a lot of times I feel like once you get to the ending, I can kind of start feeling a little bit of fatigue maybe in the writer a little bit, or, you know, you start like things get wrapped up pretty quickly or it wasn't as thought out because it's the end, let's wrap it up. This story was not at all lazy. There was no loss in momentum. It was, which I mean, if you disagree or agree or whatever, you can talk about it in the comments, but I just felt like it was just so well thought out, so well written. Everything all the way until the end was just this kind of, it drew you in. There was no loss of interest. I wasn't like, oh, now that I kind of know the story, I don't really care what happens at the end. Like sometimes that's what happens to me. I'm like, oh, all the loose ends are tied up. I'm done. You know, I've lost interest. This kind of kept me locked in till the very end. And I mean, up until like he was flung over the ledge. I mean, because I mean, he could have just fell into a puddle and been like, oh, I'm dying or whatever. I'm melting, you know, whatever. But no. And he goes back and they all like, the prisoners get arrested. And then another interesting part I really liked is when they left the house, they all aged. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. That's another thing, just like all the way up until the end, like it just, all of the detail was just there. It was just such a good story. Then you find out that before everyone left, you find out that Jaws is Rob's dad, which I totally forgot to mention that at one point they thought Rob was the murderer, that he was the one that had killed his dad and stuff. But anyways, I don't think it was, I mean, it threw me off for a second, but I was like, it's clearly not him. I don't think he's going to get pinned on this. But it did kind of distract from a couple of things that were happening. So that was just another exciting thing. Then we get to the very end, which was my favorite part of the whole book. As if it wasn't already great enough and didn't have all these amazing parts, the very end, when they hear Timmy, he wakes up finally, and they hear him playing a little flute that he made out of a chicken bone. I mean, I don't think there was a better way to end that story. That whole thing, that was just brilliant. The whole story, the storytelling in general, like what an incredible storyteller. The whole process was so good. The whole thing. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, because it was a ride, and I was not expecting this at all. The ending was so good. I did not see that coming. And a couple of people had said on the Facebook group, no spoilers, but oh my gosh, that ending. And as you're reading the ending, it's already really, really intense. So I'm thinking, oh yeah, this ending is fantastic. You know, he gets thrown over, and then you find out about Rob's dad and all this stuff. So you're like, oh yeah, like I'm like, oh yeah, you know, that was a great ending. And then the ending hits, and then you're like, I just feel like a lot of endings get wrapped up like a nice little tight present. Oh, here you go. And it's done, over, the end, happily ever after. And this was like, let me just F you up one last time. Yeah, I feel like we covered most of it. I mean, this whole book was pretty much packed with spooky elements. Let me know what you thought down in the comments, what you thought of the ending, what you thought of anything that I mentioned, or if there was anything I didn't mention or forgot to mention that you want to talk about in the comments. I can chit chat about all the things. I cannot wait to talk to you guys about this one, because this was so good. There's so much to talk about. Anyways, hope you enjoyed last month's book, and hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can give it a thumbs up, say hey ghoul hey down in the comments, because you know I love talking to you. And of course, talk about anything you want to talk about that we mentioned or didn't mention, or your favorite things, or if you liked it, if you didn't like it, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.